We have an honor to host Dr. Raúl Matta today. He came from Berlin. I'm sure some of you know Raúl. I even know some of you know, especially Renata, and especially those of you who are into food studies. But let me introduce Raúl briefly. Raúl Matta is a doctor of sociology of Sorbonne University in Paris. At the moment, he's a research fellow at the Institute of Cultural Anthropology at the University of Göttingen. But as he said, he lives in Berlin. He conducts critical research on cultural and political uses and abuses of food, and in particular focuses on heritage, on food heritage. And today's lectures is in line with his main research interest, as I suppose, Dissecting Edible Identities, a critical view on food heritage and neoliberal governmentality. So Raúl, the floor is yours. I will take more time. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for coming. I would like to first thank Renata, Ivona, and Justina for inviting me. Maybe you know, food is the most crucial component of bodily and social life next to life. Food is extremely affective. It stays in our tongues, inside emotions, while the commensal experience of such sensations binds people together through space and time. Individuals, collectively, remember experience with certain meals and imagine their ancestors having similar experiences. When this happens, food is turned into heritage and can become a site of identification and political agency. Heritage unpacks the social demarcating power of food. It makes visible the ways in which food creates social bonds and simultaneously marks off and maintains cultural differences. Across the world, the construction of food as heritage has generated extensive policy efforts for conveying the cultural dimensions of food through the interlocking of tradition, authenticity, and ownership. Governments, as well as private and civil organizations, strongly rely on heritage to create instruments to enhance the legal, commercial, and cultural value of food and food customs, whose characteristic and reputation can be variously attributed to their origins. Food inscriptions into the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage, gastronomic routes, and protected geographical labels are among the most widespread tools, bringing benefits to states and established actors in food markets. Yet, conceptualizing food as heritage also opens up an avenue for less powerful groups and individuals to gain cultural awareness, freely assert their identities, claim sovereignty, and aspire to growing visibility and economic capitalization. National, social, ethnic, and political identities are promoted and staged in order to deal with such a variety of interests. This talk aims at exploring critical directions in the study of cultural heritage, and particularly in food heritage research. Its goal is twofold. The first one is to shed light on the implications and consequences of food heritage nominations within the framework of the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, established by UNESCO. Hereinafter, we are going to refer to just as a convention. The second goal is to deliver insight into perspectives different from those produced within globally institutionalized settings. So, just as a reminder of what UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage is. So, intangible heritage means the practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, and that communities, groups, and in some cases individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. More specifically, the convention is considered as a legally binding instrument which allows for a stronger representation of heritage expressions of the South, which places communities in grassroots initiatives at the center of its activities, and which will strengthen the recognition of and support for heritage practitioners. So what can be read in these statements is a willingness to acknowledge the cultural practices and rights of, let's say, common or ordinary populations across the world. However, the convention has turned into the most powerful international instrument through which states transform their past and present cultural specificities into resources to meet contemporary demands. This is particularly salient in the case of food heritage. Indeed, after the ratification of the convention, nation-states for whom food was already relevant to their heritage and tourism began constructing narratives about their cuisines with the help of social scientists, tourism promoters, chefs, and culinary experts. The entry of food and culinary cultures into the UNESCO Heritage Framework in 2009 has unveiled and prompted the potential of food to convey national and private interests within the field of entrepreneurship and public diplomacy. Many countries now frame their national cuisines as instruments of soft power. Culinary cultures have become important components of fashionable concepts such as gastrodiplomacy and nation branding, which are reflective of a culturally oriented marketing rationale committed to promote national competitive identities. Indeed, almost every UNESCO Food Heritage Declaration has been supported by backstage policymaking aimed at marketing valuable versions of national cuisines and ethnic food products. The listing of the gastronomic meal of the French in 2010 provides a good example of this. The French government has always understood the UNESCO recognition as a strategic resource to counter the declining influence of French cuisine, as announced by some gastronomic experts, an international ranking list that put chefs from countries such as Spain, Denmark, and Italy on top positions before the French. Given the reluctance of UNESCO to inscribe elitist cultural practice such as fine dining, the government opted for what it could be called a global governance tour de force. So the French team in charge of writing the nomination file, which was composed of social science scholars and government representatives, sought to avoid any mention to specific dishes and chefs, and instead focused on the food sociability that characterizes festive meals in France. That is, spending long hours around the table, the pairing of food with wine, and respecting a fixed structure, commencing with an aperitif, these are drinks before the meal, and ending with liqueurs, containing in between at least 4 successive courses, namely a starter, fish or meat with vegetables, cheese, and dessert. So, besides the mention of very generic foods, the criterion of intelligibility has been respected. So, no specific cuisine, no specific dishes, no chefs were mentioned, but it's of the rituality that was inscribed. But shortly after the listing of this rituality, French rituality, French food rituality, let's say, the real intentions of the French government came to light. Market-oriented and international relations initiatives with the aim to promote the excellence and allegedly superiority of French cuisine were implemented. It's an international program that the French government and the Minister of Foreign Affairs developed just right after the denomination of French cuisine. So, for instance, here you can see on the bottom, they have created a trademark, a registered mark for the repas gastronomique de français. This is like they have created a mark of a cultural heritage nomination. This is actually UNESCO. UNESCO has sent warnings to the French government to this misuse, and actually the French government had to make a step back. But for example, UNESCO does not have any competence to address similar warnings for these other campaigns. These are kind of festivals that are presented, for example, in government meetings, and just to show how excellent French food is. This also it could be seen as a gastrodiplomacy strategy. For instance, this is the menu of the dîner de grand chef. This was a kind of the celebration of the UNESCO inscription. It says, for instance, we're celebrating the description of the gastronomic de français, the gastronomic French means. To do so, we're gathering 60 of the best chefs in the world, So 650 invited. They will. Okay, it's very complicated to translate. Okay, let's say that. Yeah, this is a big dinner with champagne from the Moet and Hennessy, and also there's also a visit to the gallery of the mirrors in the Palais de Versailles. So as you can see, it's just luxury at its best, I guess. So here are some other image. Discourses of government representatives. So this is very different, no? As you can see, of the real inscription. This is something more like this. It has nothing to do with that. So this is one of the abuses of the food heritage inscriptions. So this recognition. No. Let's go to Mexico now. Also in 2010 was nominated as UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage in traditional Mexican cuisine, ancestral ongoing community, the Michoacan paradigm. This recognition has backed and nurtured an initiative that, as in the French case, has largely exceeded the intentions of the convention, with explicit aims to promote better food practices and, most importantly, improve the economy. In 2015, the Mexican government launched the policy for the promotion of the national gastronomy. The policy is an intersectoral effort aimed at fostering Mexico's gastronomic offerings, promoting traditional non-industrialized food, and boosting development through restaurants and the strengthening of the food value chain. So among the objectives outlined for the policy are to foster research, innovation, and technological transfers that contribute to the productive development of Mexican gastronomy, and foster innovation and creativity to generate new products and dishes that enhance traditional Mexican cuisine. So it becomes evident that a particular focus is given to actions that Mexico's food is believed to accomplish, such as boosting the country's already existing reputation as a tourist and culinary destination. So this time, food and tradition are to perform the requirement of meeting high and updated standards of sustainability, cultural authenticity, and hygiene. So the policy encompasses many levels of application, from health-related policies to restaurant and food industry initiatives, to cultural entrepreneurship and innovation, to state-to-state communication. At the level of international relations, the Mexican brand Ven a Comer, that could be translated as come and eat, has been designed by the government's communication as a badge of quality and authenticity for products, markets, restaurants, and even cooks, both in Mexico and abroad. Ven a Comer is expected to be a key element of the country's brand image. Mexican chefs, indigenous cooks, and restaurant managers are now appointed as culinary ambassadors. The diplomatic corps of Mexican cooks cooperates with Mexican embassies and consulates in projects and programs aimed at presenting the country's food to the world. Now we move to Peru. In Peru, attempts have been made for Peruvian cuisine to enter the UNESCO list in 2012. By that time, Peruvian restaurants had opened in major world cities, and the increasing admiration of Peruvian cuisine by nationals and foreigners alike made the news almost every day. So circumstances were favorable for promoting food culture as a conveyor of meaning, identity, and national imagery, thus providing new drive to the country's cultural policy and diplomacy. The task of writing the nomination file was entrusted to members of the Peruvian diplomatic delegation at UNESCO and a gastronomic lobby called APEGA, or Peruvian Society of Gastronomy. Founded in 2007, APEGA sees Peruvian food as a tool for fostering national identity, social inclusion, and economic development all across the country. On the organizational website, it says the mission has to be accomplished by promoting the excellence of local agricultural inputs, safeguarding Peru's biodiversity, and reassigning value to the role of small agricultural producers within food chains. Yet, closer inspection on the website reveals that it is primarily about promoting Peruvian cuisine internationally, attracting tourism, and producing value-added foods products grounded on alleged sustainable principles. Indeed, despite its goals, APEGA's direction is only composed by top-down professionals. There are no representatives of peasant communities or of small-scale food traders. APEGA's rationale transpired in the nomination filed to UNESCO. The importance accorded to the introduction of predictability in traditional agricultural management, along with expectations of the increasing of productivity of local, rare, and niche products, made clear that the nature of the heritage project had little to do with cultural practice of communities and groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature, and their history. But they have much more to do with the demand of valuable ethnic foods in international markets. And this was the reason why UNESCO rejected the application in 2012. In other words, rather than recognize local and traditional food knowledge as the basis of Peruvian cuisine, the nomination file outlined a business-oriented program aiming first at propelling Peruvian food into world-class gastronomic circuits and then at selling it as cultural heritage. Maybe with a better formulated argument, when hiding the real intentions of stakeholders, the listing of Peruvian cuisine in the UNESCO list would have been successful. So as we have seen, UNESCO declarations provide evidence that food cultures cannot be appraised solely in terms of intangible heritage, which is to efface much of their complexity. Food travels across categories that belong to the registers of tangibility and intangibility. Food can be a dish or a recipe, an agricultural product or a ritual object, a basic need for survival, or an item of social distinction. Governments, NGOs, and individual actors have understood this, as they are keen to integrate cultural, traditional, not to say humanitarian values provided by heritage labels to support their own programs. However, the meanings of food heritage that prevail are those which resonate with the market and Western ideas of progress. The most common idea of food heritage is that of one national dish served in fancy restaurants. I next aim to provide room for local views for preserving and marketing food cultures that are often omitted, marginalized, or misinterpreted during heritage making. The data I will present is taken from fieldwork conducted in Peru among 2 indigenous peasant communities. Although the term heritage was never expressly mentioned by my field consultants, I could identify in their discourse and practices themes that bore a striking resemblance to those highlighted by heritage agencies. Issues such as memory, tradition, transmission, self-determination, knowledge, and sustainability emerged when they reflected on food. This does not mean, however, that these topics build common human concern or express shared universal meanings. It only indicates overlapping vocabularies, while the language of heritage in the global north has settled in the fields of public policy, cultural management, academia, and public opinion. Peruvian indigenous societies are simultaneously addressing similar issues with those same terms, but in quite different and complex ways. In partnership with the intellectual activist sphere, peasant and indigenous peoples are making sense of their food cultures and put them into display to address, discuss, and resolve issues that might keep them from living in accordance with their cultural and spiritual values. Because they display original strategies to secure the vitality and inventiveness of indigenous food cultures, we may consider their efforts as attempts to control their cultural heritage. So let's go first to the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. When one thinks of food in Peru, one often thinks of potatoes or of ceviche, which is today an international notable dish. Potatoes and ceviche represent the Andean and the coastal regions, respectively. But despite comprising more than half of the country and an enormous amount of biodiversity, the Amazon is not yet part of the national food imaginary. During my visit to the region, I was hosted by members of the NGO Wamawasi. Wamawasi means the home of the falcon in Quechua language. Since 2002, Wamawasi has been dedicated to the promotion of biodiversity, food security through small-scale agriculture, and international transmission of knowledge. Wamawasi works specifically with the Quechua indigenous group which inhabits the San Martin department in the upper part of the Peruvian Amazon rainforest. Due to its ecosystem favorable to agricultural development, San Martin has over the decades been treated as an economic colony, suited to the extraction and provision of food. By prioritizing extensive monocultivation in areas not ecologically suitable for large-scale productions, the peasant's economy has become dependent on international demand and the fluctuant prices of endorsed commodities. The traditional subsistence agriculture, based on diversity, the readings of the nature signs, and intercropping is a technique which imitates the pre-existing forest structure, has progressively diminished under the forces of political and commercial interest and the conserve of local populations to achieve better modern life conditions. The Quechua group, the poorest in the region, is particularly vulnerable as they are formed in their majority by peasants and unskilled agricultural laborers. Not only has their historical way of subsistence languished, but their population has suffered a negative demographic growth in the last 2 decades. Wamawasi's work has a strong focus on the recovery of traditional agriculture and the promotion of food security through an emphasis on crop diversification and food self-consumption. As I was told by the NGO's director, the aims are to counter the tendency of commodity-oriented agriculture to occupy the soils once destined for people's subsistence. Another goal is to avoid communities' dependence on the food market and lessen the competitive relationships between farmers, relationships that, which have been promoted by NGOs and government initiatives, such as awarding prizes and ecological certification for agricultural produce. This implementing this kind of prices has, for instance, created a kind of a competitive
Competition.
A competition between neighbors. Among the actions that Wamawasi developed to achieve these goals are food events called mikunes. Mikunes means meals in Quechua language. Mikunes are exercises of on food memory and transmission, which are performed twice a year in almost every Quechua community of this region of San Martin. Mikunes can be considered to belong to the realm of heritage making, as they involve practices of identification and classification of food items, intergenerational transmission of culinary skills, and socio-political claims at the local level. In April 2012 and 2016, I attended Mikunas in 2 communities. So the enactment of the Mikuna is similar to that of culinary festival. Food and ingredients are exhibited and specialties are cooked in real time. The gatherings start at midday around the main community square. Women unfold tarps on the ground and display the food items they have harvested, collected, and hunted. Among them are wild fruits, forest rodents, giant snakes, so you can see there, game birds, maize, river fish, plantains, beans, manioc, and local vegetables. Wamawasi assists the communities with the event schedule and logistics, and eventually offers economic support to buy food indispensable to the preparation of meals, but which cannot be produced in the small community farms. Although I had made journeys in the Amazon region before, much of this food was unknown to me. None of it corresponded to the image and representations that Peruvian cuisine and heritage agents aim to promote, which are more committed to fine dining excellence. Once all the food is displayed, the women regroup in intergenerational teams depending on the dishes they have decided to prepare, sit in circles on the ground and start to cook. Yes, that's what you see here. Just these are worms, and they're actually delicious. Older women teach younger ones how to prepare food. Yet the cooking skills are also renewed within generations. The older women exchange with each other culinary skills and knowledge, while the younger ones do the same. These observations clearly reveal that women are the guarantors of the transmission of culinary knowledge. Men remain aside from the fire pits. Some of them are of some help in manufacturing the wood skewers used to hold the wild cacao grains and the worms to be grilled. But they never cook, only women. When ready, samples of every preparation are placed in long lines on a table or over the top. Then a member of Wamawasi counts and annotates each of them in a notebook. The counting is fundamental as the results are then discussed among the community members, allowing them to reflect about the reason why sometimes they cook more dishes and why some other times they cook less. It also allows for considering, in case of shortage, whether the causes are circumstantial, for instance, an incidental weather episode, lasting, so for example, involving transitory change in the soils, or chronic, loss, which means loss of biodiversity or substantial changes in eating patterns. So they reflect about what happened after every mikuna. So the event ends with the sharing of dishes and dancing to music performed by local musicians. About mikunas, Wamawasi director says, the recovery of dishes based on indigenous knowledge, agricultural products and local food from forest plantations and the river is very important to us. What we do at mikunas is to dynamize, regenerate and remember what good eating is about, just like it has always been, because we consider that the children of the communities still eat very well. All this needs to be preserved and maintained, but always on the basis of their own agricultural knowledge. Following this consideration, mikunas contribute to the establishment of a discourse in which local perceptions of food insecurity and cultural autonomy are central and addressed in terms of ways of living. The remarks of Rosario, an indigenous woman actively involved in the mikuna, suggest indeed that these notions have been incorporated and become meaningful in the community's everyday lives. Food security is understood through the prism of health and healthy lifestyles, while cultural autonomy is expressed in terms of a conflictual relationship to the market. Rosario says, the preparation of the dishes of mikunas has been taught to us by our grandparents, and also by our parents, because they have never looked at the market. Everything came from their plantations, as they have always told us. Today we are all spying the market, yet in their times they never went to the market. They worked the forest to feed us. That's why they live in good health. But today, when we eat junk food, we get sick all the time. Our grandparents, I remember, my grandfather died 85 years old, but he never got sick. As we say, the illness only came to pick him up. It's not necessary for us to be fat, but only to be in good health and not being sick all the time. Here we all live very close to the forest. We have our lands a bit far away, and this is there that we find the food. But I think that all of this is a bit complicated for you. how could you find food like this that we bring from the chakra, from the Sweden gardens, to the pot? You first go to the market and only then you can cook. So in the light to their skeptical attitude toward the Western market and development patterns, strong local routing and scope limited to the indigenous communities of Lamas, these micunas revealed themselves as a thoroughly localized heritage initiatives. Now we move to the Andes region of Peru in a high altitude area. We go to the Potato Park. The Potato Park is located above the Sacred Valley and Pisac village in the Cusco department of the Peruvian Andes. The park is a protected highland area created in 2001 with the aim of building sustainable livelihoods. More precisely, it is an agricultural confederation collectively managed by 6 indigenous communities, involved in a project of recovering indigenous knowledge and cultural self-determination, preservation and innovation of agrobiodiversity, tubers in particular, potatoes, are the project focus. Communities merged nearly 10,000 hectares of their lands for growing, selling, and exposing native varieties of potato. Over the years, the park has become a flourishing What happened? Yes, the most important project of this nature in Peru. And an international reference of, in the fields of biodiversity management. The park, over the years, has evolved into a protected area whose management relies on both the principles of sustainable tourism and customary law. Tourist-oriented services are not yet fully developed, but as we will see later, efforts are being made in this direction. Individuals and small groups of visitors are welcome to the park. In June 2015, I signed up for a 3-day guided tour option, which included trekking through the area, meetings and sharing of meals with the inhabitants. The inhabitants are called the comuneros, because it's a community. First-hand experience of the agricultural activity and sleeping in a local family's house. While walking at altitude between 3,000 and 5,000 meters, local guides provided me with an overview of the dynamics of Andean potato cultivation and consumption. I learned, for instance, that regular varieties, or papas mejoradas, which are hybrid high-yield potatoes, the ones we find in supermarkets, are mostly a cash crop, so just to sell. I also learned that native varieties are for community subsistence, and very high altitude bitter potatoes are dehydrated for food stock. I had the opportunity to appreciate dozens of native varieties, each more surprisingly different than the other. I also received palatable instruction. I ate potatoes and other curious tubers 3 times a day, for breakfast and dinners in the company of my host, and for lunch in the company of my partner.
Sounds like Polish village.
It's more or less that.
Russian village.
The function of the park as a biodiversity conservation area relies on the articulation of the goods and services produced by comuneros and the expertise provided by this funding organization, the NGO Andes. Created in 1995 and funded by grants from Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, and other international NGOs, Andes is dedicated to the defense of the environmental and cultural rights of Andean populations. The central figure behind the NGO's consolidation is the director, Alejandro Argumedo. Argumedo presents himself as a Quechua indigenous. He possesses an agronomy degree from McGill University and has achieved wide recognition in the international cooperation field as a specialist on indigenous rights-related topics. The close cooperation between Argumedo and the UK-based International Institute for the Environment and Development has been crucial to the development of the concept at the core of Andes' work, that of collective biocultural heritage. which is defined as knowledge, innovations, and practice of indigenous and local communities which are collectively held and inextricably linked to traditional resources and territories, local economies, the diversity of genes, varieties, species, and ecosystem, cultural and spiritual values, and customary laws shaped within the socio-ecological context of communities. It's a very holistic definition of cultural heritage that I hate that has little to do with the UNESCO. So, work on native potato conservation and production is Andes benchmark in PISA. The NGO draws on the inherent Andean relationship of reciprocal nurturing between humans and nature to reestablish indigenous ethics of sharing, care, and respect, which are seen as being eroded by modernity. Potatoes and seeds are thus fundamental both for the nourishment and for accomplishing the obligations of reciprocity and mutualism dictated by the AINI, the Andean customary law. Andes' highest achievement occurred at the end of 2004 when it succeeded in repatriating native potatoes and seeds for in situ cultivation from the International Potato Center. This is the organization that has the world's biggest potato seed bank. So today the park counts around 1,000, more than 1,000 potato varieties. This success opened up avenues for further developing the protection of traditional knowledge in a holistic manner and in accordance with the notion of collective biocultural heritage. The repatriation of seeds had led to a broader recovery of valuable local plant varieties and other customary knowledge related to biodiversity, such as culinary arts, gardening, and crafts. The park has now become a flourishing agro-ecotourism center. Next to the older buildings constructed across its area, such as the Potato Reproduction Center, the seed bank, and the greenhouses, new structures have been erected, such as traditional food restaurant kept by the women of the park, stores for selling goods produced locally, and houses serving as eco-lodges. Besides the hospitality on offer, visitors are invited to learn about and buy traditional healing products, toiletries made of potato, such as potato shampoo, potato liquid soap, and of other local plants and herbs, craft and mystical services. The production of all these goods has been distributed into specialized economic working groups, each involving about a dozen members from the different communities. In addition, a job rotation system and a principle of profit distribution in harmony with the AINI reciprocity law ensure that all members of the economic working groups receive benefits. This evolution is related to Andes' aptitude for innovating its discourse and prospects and articulating new, ideologically consistent initiatives. Indeed, the park's productive diversification is not merely an opening up to market forces. Most importantly, it is conceived as a crucial step towards a business model committed to generating income without necessarily clashing with cultural and spiritual values or with long-established customary norms. Such conceptualization is possible due to Argumedo and the Institute for the Environment collaborators' extensive involvement in the activist and the scholarly spheres, in which they have contributed to the debates on the use of intellectual property rights for the protection and promotion of indigenous knowledge. So, the park is, in this sense, a fertile ground for experimentation. The most recent is the creation of the collective trademark Parque de la Papa, Potato Park, to commercialize the park's new goods and service. The trademark draws on the concept of biocultural heritage indications, which in turn draws extensively on geographical indications and other allegedly soft and indigenous-friendly IPR tools. So in this particular context, the biocultural heritage indication is an instrument intended to bypass the bureaucratic constraint imposed by the Peruvian state intellectual property regulations. So the Peruvian government has a kind of defined some rules for new geographical indications, but that communities are not able to meet because it's too much bureaucratic. So they have created their own indications to counter this, to enter markets by their own ways. So, for instance, the Parque de la Papa trademark is in use, but is not formally registered, as it does not fit in any intellectual property rights category proposed by the state. This trademark is a way for comuneros to exercise control over the market development. So, to sum up, from initial focus on potato diversity conservation, the park is now devoted to broader objectives which are still in accordance with its critical standpoints of development. But as could be expected, and despite the solid concept on which Andes builds its new mission, the park's recent evolution has prompted challenge in terms of social cohesion and governance. Indeed, as the discourse and goods have increased and become more technical and sophisticated, for instance, these marks, so have the needs of productive skills and management. People now need to they need to learn to read, they need to learn mathematics, a little bit of business, and also work with internet tools. So this has led to the strengthening of the decision makers and skilled workers positions, and consequently to sentiments of exclusion among the less skilled comuneros. So also uncertainties related to the distribution of benefits have also arisen and created an environment conducive to temptations to take shortcuts from the park's procedures. So let's say that even though this is a very, very local initiative, and the objectives are kind of a bit lost. Focus on communities, on the world of communities. The implementation is not easy, and they create some kind of a conflict between people as well. So, for example, the most striking example occurred in 2011 when the community of Cuyo Grande, one of the 6 communities in the park, decided to separate from the conglomerate to manage the flux of visitors that arrive within its border itself, and thus benefit alone from its proximity to the park. Actually, they wanted to receive tourists and outside the norms of the park. For instance, before leaving the park, my host handed me a colored business card. One side of the card showed an image of the park landscapes, women doing traditional weaving, and my host's kitchen table ready for traditional breakfast. The other side of the card showed 4 contact mobile phone numbers, a list of offered services, like exploration tourism, trekking, crafts, gastronomy, and horse riding, and the business name. My host asked me to directly contact her for my next visit, so I could enjoy the same service offered by the park for a lower price. She also informed me that she did not conduct the business alone, but together with her cousin, who happened to be one of my trekking guides. So, conclusions. So the first conclusion is that culture and its associated products are now key elements which nation states use to promote tourism and enhance the symbolic value of their products by transferring the country's image to the exports. Accordingly, they are ever more shaped to be recognizable to foreign visitors, cosmopolitan consumers, and global investors. These ideological interventions in the cultural economy have made it possible for the concept of value to have a more strategic, literal application. Culture, whether mass or niche, official or marginalized, mainstream or ethnic, is now valuable in concrete economic ways and is easily propelled into the logic of a neoliberal marketplace. The second conclusion is complementary to the first, matches the critique of the recent evolution of cultural heritage management, which is seen as increasingly neoliberal. Yet it is argued that the dominance of market ideologies and practices of valuation within heritage regimes is not linked to the neoliberal experience of withdrawal of the state, but to a new decentralization and distribution of governmental powers that foster the articulation of collective subjectivities holding possessive relationships to culture. The neoliberal take on heritage management involves a dispersion of heritage agency that encourages heritage entrepreneurship. This means that now any of us can become a heritage entrepreneur. More specifically, it consists in delegating empowering public and private agencies, NGOs, international organizations, experts, scholars like us, and other professional or influential individuals, while states are legitimized as key actors in this process. The selection of cultural attributes to be safeguarded and promoted is, in general, the duty of local power structures that may either follow state mandates regarding cultural resources, interpret international cultural governance frames into a local system, or determine for themselves the social application which culture is expected to accomplish. This kind of laissez-faire sometimes leads to the invention of positively connoted cultural narratives and fictions, and thus obscure the controversial and less desirable aspects existing within past and present intercultural relations. Indeed, and despite the redistributive ethics and the dialogic nature with which the notion of cultural heritage is commonly granted, cultural expressions regularly faces top-down appropriation and commodification that benefits governments and cultural industries. That means not only that the notion of cultural heritage has not clearly prospered in emancipating cultural bearers from asymmetrical power relations, it also means that vulnerable populations such as minorities, indigenous groups, and remote rural communities, for whose benefit cultural heritage policies have been devised, at least theoretically, may suffer from marginalization after the implementation of heritage programs in their living areas. Such outcomes should not come as a surprise, as international heritage organizations, and UNESCO in particular, recognize national governments as their main and often only interlocutors. This results in the strange policy phenomenon of states being asked to apply bottom-up approaches that are community-driven. But while states increasingly draw on the notion of cultural heritage as a resource to serve their political, economic, and cultural agendas, indigenous and vulnerable groups have developed alternative, parallel, and sometimes unspoken, culturally rooted strategies to ensure some control of their lives. However, the local or indigenous initiatives and those engaged within global institutional frameworks, like UNESCO, differ in terms of decisions of the control of cultural resources and the scope of their impact, with the former, the indigenous initiatives, being more narrow and delimited, more precise, and consequently less ambitious and pontifical. So that's it. Thank you.